I'm Andrew. I work at A&E. Thank you, everybody, for the honor to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm here today on behalf of the SOSNHS Coalition at a time when the NHS is facing an existential crisis, a humanitarian crisis, just as we're about to celebrate the 75th anniversary of one of the greatest achievements in the history of this country, our beloved NHS. And when I say beloved NHS, this isn't some NHS socialist cult hero worship thing. It's not some fantasy. This is cold, hard, indisputable facts. We love the NHS because 10 years ago, the Commonwealth Fund ranked the NHS the best healthcare system in the world.
Yeah.
The UK model was #1. That's why we love it. We beat every other country on the goddamn planet. We were that good. That was after record funding and care went into it from labor. And do you know where my home country of the United States was ranked among all of those wealthy countries in healthcare rankings?
Bottom.
At the bottom. It was dead last. If you want an efficient healthcare service, then properly fund it, properly care for it, and you better keep our NHS public.
Yeah.
But if you want to introduce inefficiency into a healthcare system, go ahead and privatize it. If you want to waste taxpayer funds, go ahead and privatize it. And over the last 10 years, the Conservatives have done just that. We went from the best system on the planet to now among the worst in Europe. And the situation right now is truly awful. NHS waiting lists are at 7.2 million people long, the worst in NHS history. They were nearly 5 million before COVID, so Rishi Sunak, you cannot blame the pandemic. Our A&E waiting and cancer diagnosis times are the worst in NHS history as well. Our winter crisis is now an all-season, all-year crisis, and at a time when we need real leadership in the NHS to fix these problems, the arsonists in government who lit the fire intentionally are refusing to do anything to put it out. Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives fiddle while it all burns down. For staff working in many A&E departments across the country, a good shift nowadays is one where someone doesn't die in your waiting room or show up dead on arrival on the back of a delayed ambulance. The numbers are horrifying. 500 people every week are now dying because of delays accessing emergency care. 500 people. 500 preventable deaths every single week. Let's put that number into perspective. 500 deaths is equivalent to a fully loaded 747 crashing with no survivors every week. 500 deaths is 2 Lockerbie disasters every week. That's 5 Hillsborough disasters every week. 7 Grenfell Towers every week. 10 7/7s every week. 20 Manchester Arena bombings every single week. A government that allows that to happen in the 6th wealthiest country on the planet does not deserve to be anywhere near power.
Yeah.
They deserve to be in prison. So right now we're facing the consequences of a decade of NHS underfunding where we saw the NHS starve to £400 billion. A government that closed over 100 A&E departments, eliminated 25,000 hospital beds, and delivered a nightmare social care crisis. They failed to plan for a pandemic and tens of thousands of avoidable deaths occurred. 2,000 of our NHS brothers and sisters were killed. They have made working in the NHS so difficult that NHS staff are leaving in droves. And after the heroism that our colleagues showed during the pandemic, we have a health secretary with the audacity to tell all of us to work harder to justify a pay rise.
Yeah.
Mr. Barclay, this is what I think of that. NHS staff has seen their pay eroded by up to 30% in the last 15 years. Half of our hospitals are setting up food banks or food assistance programs to help hungry staff and their families. If we can't pay our bills, pay our student debt, pay our registration fees, pay for our parking, then there will be no NHS staff to care for patients. No pay restoration equals no doctors, no nurses, no physiotherapists, no radiographers, no NHS staff. We will simply be forced to work in a different country because we can't afford to live here. It's that simple. And call me old-fashioned, but I think that something is deeply rotten in the state of England when the wealthiest prime minister in British history, someone with twice the wealth as King Charles himself, is denying a living wage to pandemic frontline workers while he builds a new swimming pool on the grounds of his 3rd or 4th or 5th or whatever mansion. Something is deeply rotten in the state of England. Now, I don't like to call anyone evil, but to paraphrase the great American philosopher Forrest Gump, evil is as evil does. Denying NHS workers a living wage, especially after our pandemic service, is evil. I'll be honest, without the SOSNHS Coalition, the People's Assembly, the unions that are represented here today, the patients and their families, the workers who are fighting back, and all of you here today in the audience, I don't know if I would have the energy to keep going right now. But our anger is what has motivated a lot of us to be here today. It's the anger that actually gives me a considerable amount of hope. For those curious how they can help the cause, the answer is actually quite simple. Be outraged. Get angry. Speak to your MP and march with us. Keep our NHS public, NHS workers say no, and NHS staff voices are leading an NHS Solidarity March this Wednesday, January 18th, right here in London. We'd love to march with you. Please join us. And God damn it, please bring a funny sign. Here we go. When times get dark, and there will be many more dark times ahead, another 500 people will die this week and the next week and the next week and the next. Take solace in the fact that this government's days are numbered. At some point, we will have a general election, and with a new government that cares about the NHS and values your health. Until then, join the SOSNHS resistance, march with us, and together we will mark the 75th anniversary of our beloved NHS with optimism and hope for a healthier, safer future for all. Solidarity, thank you.